Good afternoon. Today is Friday, the 12th of July, 2024, few minutes after 1 o'clock, or a little bit after 1 o'clock. Apologies for that. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson, and we're delighted to be joined by Ben Rubin. The focus is very much on NATO and politics unfolding, particularly in the UK.
Well, let's begin with the NATO declaration because a friend of mine wrote to me yesterday and said this is probably the most confrontational, warmongering document that he's ever seen. And I think that is pretty much it. So the summit declaration has been made, and I think it deserves us going through this in a little bit of detail because it is horrendous. So bearing in mind that this is, a diplomatic document, and diplomatic language tends to be relatively gentle and soft and measured. This is quite incredible. So we, the heads of state and government of the North Atlantic Alliance, have gathered in Washington to celebrate the 75th anniversary of our alliance, forged to preserve peace. So we've got to remember this is a defensive alliance. So as you listen to the words here, you consider the defensiveness of it. Forged to preserve peace, NATO remains the strongest alliance in history. We stand in unity and solidarity in face of a brutal war of aggression on the European continent at a critical time for our security. We warmly welcome our 32nd and newest ally, Sweden. The historic accession of Finland and Sweden makes them safer and our alliance stronger, including in the High North and the Baltic Sea. Every nation has the right to choose its own security arrangements. We reaffirm our commitment to NATO's open door policy in line with Article 10 of the Washington Treaty. So, Brian, right there, despite all the claims that Putin is expansionist and Xi Jinping is expansionist, they're openly declaring their continuing commitment to expansionism.
And the expansion to the east is what's causing the problem.
Exactly. So let's go on then. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has shattered peace and stability in the Euro-Atlantic area and gravely undermined global security. Russia remains the most significant and direct threat to ally security. Terrorism in all its forms and manifestations is the most direct asymmetric threat to the security of our citizens and to international peace and prosperity. The threats we face are global and interconnected. So in that paragraph, they are suggesting that Russia is behind global terrorism, when in fact, I would suggest, and I think there's a ton of evidence that we've covered over the last 15 years, Brian, that Britain, the United States, the EU tend to be funding and behind global terrorism.
I think the evidence has become overwhelming, Mike, that when you go into these things that the West, UK, the US in particular, are at the bottom of a lot of troubles in the world, and the lid needs to be taken off this, otherwise it will not stop.
Indeed. So we continue. Strategic competition, pervasive instability, and recurrent shocks define our broader security environment. Conflict, fragility, and instability in Africa and the Middle East directly affect our security and the security of our partners. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but the Tony Blair Institute is very active in Africa and the Middle East, right?
Yes.
Yeah, anyway, okay.
And have we got more trouble in Africa? Yes, we have. Is the EU active in Africa? Yes, more trouble.
Yes. Where present, these trends, among others, contribute to forced displacement, fueling human trafficking and irregular migration. So we're just going to ignore the fact that we're driving this human trafficking and irregular migration and blame it all on the Russians, because that's the best thing to do. Iran's destabilizing actions are affecting Euro-Atlantic security. The People's Republic of China's stated ambitions and coercive policies continue to challenge our interests, security and values. The deepening strategic partnership between Russia and the People's Republic of China and their mutually reinforcing attempts to undercut and reshape the rules-based international order are a cause for profound concern. So it's now clear Russia, Iran, PRC are the main targets of this defensive alliance. So we don't want to, have a conversation with these people because that might bring peace about. So we've just got to continue to bang the war drums.
And of course, they are mocking the rules-based international order where nobody is ever allowed to know what the exact rules are, the purpose of those rules.
They go on. State and non-state actors are increasingly aggressive hybrid actions are using increasingly aggressive hybrid actions against allies. We will continue to prepare for, deter, defend against and counter hybrid threats and challenges. We reiterate that hybrid operations against allies could reach the level of an armed attack and could lead the North Atlantic Council to invoke Article 5 of the Washington Treaty. So later on in the programme, we're going to be looking once again at cyber and who is actually behind most of the cyber warfare that's going on in the world at the moment. Well, this could lead apparently to an invocation of Article 5, only if we attack ourselves. But anyway, it goes on. We condemn Russia's irresponsible nuclear rhetoric and coercive nuclear signaling, including its announced stationing of nuclear weapons in Belarus, which demonstrate a posture of strategic intimidation. Let's just remind ourselves that it is the United States that has effectively withdrawn from the intermediate nuclear weapons agreements. And it's the United States that's talking about putting nuclear weapons back into Germany and other countries at the moment. So if Russia is talking about putting nuclear weapons into Belarus, that is in reaction. This is in reaction to what the US and NATO is doing once again. But don't worry, we're going to tell the entire world, and the narrative is that it's all Russia that's doing it. Russia has increased its reliance on nuclear weapon systems and continued to diversify its nuclear forces, including by developing novel nuclear systems and deploying short and intermediate range dual-capable strike capabilities, all of which pose a growing threat to the alliance. We are determined to constrain and contest Russia's aggressive actions and to counter its ability to conduct destabilizing activities towards NATO and allies. For our next summit, we will develop recommendations on NATO's strategic approach to Russia, taking into account the changing security environment. And they talk about the European Union being an essential partner. So this is all about EU defence union is now back on the agenda, firmly back on the agenda. And here we will meet the leadership of Australia, Japan, New Zealand and the Republic of Korea, because we've got to expand not only eastwards in Europe, but also in the Indo-Pacific region. The Indo-Pacific is important for NATO, given that developments in that region directly affect Euro-Atlantic security. And with respect to Ukraine themselves, they have agreed to set up the NATO Security Alliance and training for Ukraine. The pledge of long-term security assistance for Ukraine, and finally, establishment of the NATO-Ukraine Joint Analysis Training and Education Centre. So I don't know what you make of that, Brian, but the rhetoric is extremely strong and extremely warlike and not defensive in any way, shape or form.
Well, the word rhetoric covers it all, because it is rhetoric, and we can see that we've got people who are not interested in peace. If they were interested in peace, they'd be talking about peace and they'd be talking about pathways to peace. But they're obsessed with Ukraine, because Ukraine must be held at all cost. It must be asset stripped. It must be converted to European-style democracy, whatever that means. And what better place to go than a little bit of a video clip here with Defence Secretary John Healey talking about Ukraine.
General Hodges just said, look, we need to view Ukraine in our own strategic interest. He's a general, he's got that strategic insight. I'm a politician, I'd put it plainly, because I don't think our public and our people fully and properly understand what's at stake here. And so some of the arguments I try to make in the UK are, especially on the campaign trail, which we've just finished, defence of the UK starts with Ukraine. And that's true for us, it's true for most of the European nations, it's relevant also to America's interests as well. And that's the case because we know that if Putin prevails in Ukraine, he's not going to stop there.
How do they know that?
Well, of course they don't. World War III starts with Ukraine. It's nothing to do with the defence of UK. It's to do with starting a world war. But you notice the sneer, our people, the public, they just don't understand. We're all just little people. We can't possibly understand that the UK has helped whip up a horrific war in Ukraine. Dead on the Ukrainian side, the figure 500,000 being repeated now by many analysts, and I could believe this is true. And of course, Zelensky working hard to try and recruit now his third army. Why does he need another 200,000 men? Because of course the others are dead on the battlefield as a result of Conservatives and now the New Labour rhetoric. So Biden, of course, is the main powerhouse behind NATO. It is the Americans. Let's have a look at Biden in action.
I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
Thank you so much.
So the man, we are told, has his finger on the nuclear button, who can't think, who can't string words together, who can't function as the President of the United States, and we are to believe that he is the one manipulating politics. That was just one clip. There are many of him fumbling and stumbling through his words or falling up or down the steps of aircraft. But we shouldn't worry, because apparently we just don't understand, and there's nothing wrong with Biden. Who should we believe? Let's look at this clip.
The special relationship is so important. It's forged in difficult circumstances, endured for so long, and stronger now than ever. So we're very pleased to be able to come so early in the government to recommit to NATO, to recommit to the special relationship, and to have the opportunity to discuss these affairs with you is really important for us.
Figurative sense,
5 days in.
I kind of see you guys as the knot tying the transatlantic alliance together. The closer you are with Europe, the more you're engaged, the more, because we know where you are, we know where we are in both countries.
No, I think that's absolutely right.
Well, there we are. There's President Biden talking about bits of string, presumably rotten string and granny knots. But at one stage, Starmer was pressed over the mental state of Biden. And let's hear what he says.
Prime Minister, you know what an increasing number of people are saying? They're implying that President Biden is senile. Is he?
No, we had a really good bilateral yesterday. We were billed for 45 minutes. We went on for the best part of an hour. We went through a huge number of issues at pace. He was actually on really good form and
mentally agile.
Absolutely across all the detail. We were going at pace through a number of issues, which was really important to me because obviously it was my first opportunity to have a bilateral like that. And he's shown incredible leadership. If there's one thing that came out of the council session yesterday, it was a clear understanding by everybody here that we face probably more threats now than we've faced for many years, and that we need the resolve of NATO as the alliance that's been there for a very long time, that defensive alliance. And President Biden has led through that some of the most challenging issues actually that we are facing globally.
We've seen George Clooney suggesting he's not up to it. Is that unfair?
Well, I've given you my readout of the meeting. We had, as I say, we covered a lot of ground, strategic ground, international stuff, and not just Ukraine. He was on good form, and of course, you know, various interventions yesterday. We went straight from that to the dinner that he hosted. So.
He was in good form not something to say when you've been to visit your aging grandparents in the care home?
Yeah, and you're trying to keep morale up in the family.
Yes.
So my opinion is that Starmer's happy to look at the camera and just lie about the true condition of the US president. That's my personal opinion. People might disagree, but something's very wrong. But let's look at something else that's happening in the background, which I find very disturbing. It's the power of celebrity.
Let me ask you something that's on a lot of people's minds. What are your thoughts about President Biden? Should he drop out of the race?
Could he? Yes, he could.
Should he?
Should he? It's a painful decision because I admire the man tremendously. I personally had a fundraiser for him at Mar House in April, and I think he's done an incredible job. But I am worried, not this week or next week, but let's say next year. And it's just so hard for me to imagine a man 4.5 years down the line from now, particularly in a time that's so combative, that requires somebody to really be so articulate. I think the most disappointing thing for me in the debate was not necessarily how he felt, but the inability to acknowledge all the lies that ex-President Trump was talking about.
Do you think, though, that figures in the entertainment industry like yourself can bring about real tangible action in terms of President Biden making a decision as opposed to statements from politicians in Washington?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, we've been accused of having a little bigger voice than we should have, but we're all involved in, as celebrities.
So, Mr. Douglas, they're espousing the power of celebrities. And of course, this in itself, whatever we think of Biden, is immensely dangerous, that the celebrity world should be able to drive politics and keep a president, for example, in place who clearly wants war and more war. But it's not only celebrities with the power. Let's have a look at this headline from The Independent. And this is back in October 2023. Starmer wins backing of billionaire BlackRock chief. He offers hope to British politics. Larry Fink, one of the world's most influential financiers, says Labour leader has shown, quote, real strength. But who else have we got in the mix? And let's have a look at David Lammy. Sky News here with the headline, Everything You Need to Know About the UK's new Foreign Secretary. But what they didn't say is what we can pop up on screen, which is a tweet here from David Lammy in August 2020. He says that cultural Marxism is going to rule this country. Nigel, that's Nigel Farage, you are a racist B and an insult to the history of this country. We're coming for you and we will, quote, we will beat you silly. There's no coming back. So we can be very sure that this very slick new Labour 2.0 is going to be very, very ruthless and dangerous in getting these policies through. And that probably brings us to Tony Blair, who is now, of course, the real queen, the power behind the Starmer throne. But here was a headline of some time ago. Rupert Murdoch donated $100,000 to the Tony Blair Faith charity, unaware his wife had allegedly grown close to the ex-PM. And in the text, which we won't read, it talks about that money and it talks about the Mr. Blair's relationship with Ms. Deng. So this is the real power. And I think, Ben, that's a nice place to bring you in because, of course, you've been maintaining focus on Tony Blair and what he's really doing.
Indeed. Great to be here, everyone. Hope you're having a good end to the week. And we're going to talk about the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change Future of Great Britain event. And we're going to start by hearing from Tony Blair himself. We're going to pose a question to him. What is the problem, Mr. Blair?
The problem is that we have low growth, low productivity. We've got public services where there are high levels of expenditure and poor outcomes. The two things that get growth and productivity back are first the types of things that Rachel Reeves was talking about yesterday, planning reform, probably a better Brexit deal. These will give you short term, it should give you a reasonable boost to economic growth. But our belief is that the only long-term solution to growth, productivity, and better public services is the full embrace of this technology revolution, which prior to generative AI was already a revolution. And now I think you've got with generative AI a revolution on top of the revolution existing.
So the problem we face as a country has got nothing to do with corrupt politicians. It's just about low growth and productivity in the markets and high expenditure and poor outcomes in the state. And the only long-term solution, according to Tony Blair, is the full embrace of new technology. This new technology revolution that he talked about at this event that he runs. This is the third year that it's been going for, the Future of Britain 2024, led by Tony Blair. We've already had a little bit of a background from Brian there about Blair's influence over British politics and society, but let's just remind ourselves of a couple of gems from his back catalogue. So he obviously took us into an illegal war in Iraq and then refused to apologise. Actually said that he'd do it all again, despite the fact that 1 million Iraqi civilians were killed. He's also a close personal friend of the paedophile and rapist Jimmy Savile. And I'm just going to leave it there because we'd be here all afternoon talking about the evils of our former prime minister. So what's he up to these days? Well, he's projecting global power, right? And he has this thing called the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. And we've heard a lot about change through the recent election period. And I think that this is where a lot of that change is being driven from. It was delivered in partnership with My Life, My Say, the UK youth charity that we've talked about extensively, that's focused on radically reshaping British society. In fact, they have helped to radically reshape British society in the general election. They are intimately linked into the top levels of the Labour government. Starmer actually came to the event last year, the Future Great Britain event last year, and Harjeet Sahota, who's the head of external relations and stakeholders at the UK Labour Party, is actually on the board of My Life, My Say. So you should really understand that this is just one entity that we're looking at here. They may have different logos, different departments, different names, but ultimately they're all working together towards the same outcomes. Now, because My Life, My Say was involved, obviously it's all about the youth. So front and centre, opening up the day, we had these two young women, Sasha Hayko, who is a 30-year-old working on the censorship, in the censorship space. And then another woman called Avye Kulut, who is big into getting young women into coding. And she's just 16 years old, right? So we've got a 30-year-old, a 16-year-old, neither of whom are native Brits, right? So these are immigrant communities, young women who've been brought in. And I just see this as a really cynical and manipulative ploy by Blair, who is a war criminal, as we've established, to basically provide him with air cover, to burnish his reputation, and to basically entice people into believing that he's a good guy that's got a good and positive and constructive plans for the future of the country. Now, they got 5 minutes at the start of the day, right? So we've got to bring the young people in. It's all about them. We've got to listen to them, but actually we'll get them off stage as quickly as possible. And then it's over to Uncle Tony. And what does Uncle Tony want to talk about? He wants to talk about digital ID. He's been talking about this for 25 years plus, right? He is obsessed with the ID scheme. This is the ultimate tool for centralized monitoring and control of the population. It's really the end game for freedom. You know, at this point, you are completely owned and controlled by the state. He's obviously got a narrative that's about how great it is. It's about raising more money through taxes, saving money from reductions in things like benefit fraud, distributing benefits more efficiently during times of crisis, especially crises caused by the state. And they've talked about this in great detail in this 33-page report that was issued that very same morning. So it actually came out on the day of the Future Great Britain event. And this is something that has been done by in collaboration with the Department of Work and Pensions. And they project that they could free up as much as 40% of work time using AI tools. And that could be the equivalent of about £1 billion a year in productivity gains. So this is a huge re-engineering of the British state. Obviously, that would have been started, that piece of work, under the previous government, and it's now been surfaced today. So you can see how this kind of uniparty moves. Policies developed by people like Blair, and it's implemented by whoever happens to be in government at that moment in time. It was done with this organisation. You can just see it referenced there on the slide, which is called Faculty, which is another private AI specialist consulting firm that's been working across the whole of central government. And I believe this was done with internal engagement from inside the Department for Work and Pensions. So I think that this is something that has been going on in close collaboration between Blair, Faculty and the British government. And to build the narrative for this, they brought this fella along, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, who is a former Indian minister and a self-proclaimed digital ID evangelist. And he describes digital identity as the core, the bedrock to a digital government architecture. The Indians have invested a huge amount of money in this. They've got 1.2 billion people on their digital government platform, and they've dispersed through that platform $350 billion worth of what he calls subsidies. This is why this is really relevant to the Department of Work and Pensions. They handle benefits. The Indian system handles what he calls subsidies. And effectively, they brought this guy over to help build the case to implement this inside government in the first week of a new Labour government, right? I mean, you can see how this is really being ushered along incredibly quickly. And it's about, all of the things that they say. It's about efficiency and delivering better services and all that kind of thing. But ultimately, it really ends up here, right? You will be able to do more with AI than any government has in the past. Yeah, this is about increasing the power of the state. They talk about it in terms of efficiency, but I don't see it in that way at all. Also worth noting that system that he was there to talk about was built by Infosys, which is owned by Rishi Sunak's father-in-law. So again, you can see the uniparty in play. And it's not just DWP. The whole of government's on the block, and it's very much about healthcare. For some reason, I can't imagine why this might be. I'm sure it's nothing to do with Tony Blair. Britain has become increasingly sick over the past 5 years. So we've seen the number of people off with long-term sickness go up by 800,000 to 2.83 million. We've seen spending on disability and incapacity benefits go up by a third to 69 billion. It's now 2.5% of GDP. NHS spending on mental health has risen to 17 billion. That's about 10% of the total NHS budget. But don't worry, we've got a whole load of new medical breakthroughs, new innovations in preventative care, preventative health care. This is the new buzzword. You're hearing it absolutely everywhere. It basically means algorithmic surveillance, testing, genetic engineering. All of this is focused on addressing some of the biggest killers, so cardiovascular disease, obesity, cancer, good things for us to try and combat. But if you actually look back at the slide, you can see that it's all about promoting pharmaceuticals like Ozempic, RNA cancer vaccines, all of the kind of big blockbuster items that the big pharmaceuticals are trying to push out there into the system. Apparently that would save us a load of money. This is about half of the NHS budget goes against those three diseases. So again, it would be a great thing to focus on, but ultimately, like, what are the methods and that are being presented here for us to go after? And actually, a lot of this really very crudely and cynically about economic growth. Yeah, so we heard this a lot. We're talking about healthier people, but that's ultimately about delivering a healthier economy to deliver healthier public finances, right? So for these people, we are basically economic units and taxpayers, and our health system is a public-private marketplace. And Wes Streeting was perfectly happy to turn up and endorse that worldview, basically saying there is an obvious mutual interest between the public and private sectors. It's not reductive. The private sector companies need to make a profit. That's fine. If you can marry the brightest minds in UK science and health tech with the scale of the NHS, the sky is the limit in terms of what we can do. Lord Bethell was very happy with this. He welcomed Starmer and Streeting into government last week, basically saying that a lot of the work has already been done for us to transition to a 21st century model of care. The groundwork has been laid out. There is a stack of thoughtful white papers, NHS plans and review recommendations ready for implementation, including documents like this one, which came out from the Blair Institute earlier on this year, which is a forward written by Patrick Vallance, who's just been dropped into a ministerial role working under Wes Streeting. And just finally, to wrap up, I'll come back to this later. There's a huge amount to cover on this today. This incredible statement from Streeting, which I think really just does a great job of describing the tone that we should expect to see from the Labour government as we progress. If you love someone, you have to force them to change.
Okay, well, I think that gives us a clue where we're going. So thank you for that, Ben. We'll come back onto this topic a little bit later. In the meantime, if you like what the UK Column's doing, if you'd like to support us, please head over to support.ukcolumn.org. A membership is just £5 a month. We do need your support. So anybody that isn't a member would like to join us for extra later, please do consider that. But with the censorship regime that we have, we do need you to be our algorithm, as it were, and to push out our material. So if you can push it out from ukcolumn.org and ukcolumnextracts.co.uk in particular, that would be fantastic. You could pick something up at the UK Column shop, especially Your Life in Their Hands.
Yes, and I'll say once again a huge thank you to all of the UK Column viewers, listeners and members who've actually purchased one of these. I asked if every UK Column member could buy one. This would be a huge help to us, and it would also allow you to see this new information format that we fully intend to do more of. So if you haven't got one, please get your order into Claire in the shop, and we'll be pleased to get one sent out to you.
And another reminder of a date for your diary, which is Saturday the 19th of October 2024 at a venue in Bristol, which we'll announce later, a day-long event with us all there. So
it's really live.
really live, yes. So do join us for that if you can. So now, where does that take us? It takes us to hearing.
Well, it's going to take us to hearing, but I'm smiling. We've often said to our viewers that we put the UK Column News together very shortly before we actually go live, and we don't plan a lot of things, but it's amazing the connectivity. So Ben, you've been talking about Tony Blair and digital ID. You've also been talking about a new national purpose, harnessing data for health. Well, a letter arrived through my letterbox. Let's have a look at it. Here it is. Dear Mr. Gerrish, as part of our National Hearing Health campaign, you are invited for a free hearing test. And I think Mike and the rest of the team will be pleased about this, because I do have some issues. It was due to cannon fire during my naval days. But this is what it said. So, of course, a lot of it is the sell. You're complaining that TV is too loud to other people, difficulty hearing people in restaurants, cafes and pubs, etc. And then it says that I can use a free number to book a free hearing test. Presumably I won't get a free hearing aid, but there we are. And it's signed by Chris Child, Head of Audiology Excellence. Now, I was very intrigued because I thought, okay, where did the National Hearing Health Campaign get my data from? Well, let's have a look at the letter again. And what we need to do is to go into the small print. And it says, we've sourced your details from Saga City Data Limited. Now, I'd never heard of that company at all. So, of course, I went and did my own research. It's all very nice. There's the little cartoon for the adults to suck them in. But the little man is walking past some really big clients, from Virgin O2 to British Gas, Sky, Macmillan, Eon, BT, Titan, the Cooperative Bank. But what sort of company is it? Well, when you get into the detail, you find that it's not just about data, it's also about essentially revenue collection. It's making sure that if you owe money, these companies can get that money. If we have a look at partners, agencies and investors, apologies, this bit runs a little bit slow, but these are some of the people that they've got for partners: Equifax, Media Lab, that was very interesting, but also Royal Mail, which probably gives us connection with my own letter. But it says we're one of the most data-rich organisations in the UK. But I did notice that one of the investors was Queen Park Equity, which I believe is a hedge fund, Mike.
Sounds like it, yes.
I don't understand it. So let's have a look at where this hearing test led me. This is some of, is this going to play? There we are. This is some of their own advertising material on the website: reducing gap sites and increasing revenue. This is a project or a case study, 2.6 million. There's case studies up to 12 million. And this is all about revenue stream. So it's profit and making sure you can claw back in any debts owed to the company. And as we can see, there's some pretty big sums of money. But where I really started to suck in a bit of breath was here. Our ethos, we're a purpose-led company, and we believe that purpose comes before profit. Do you understand that? Because I didn't quite. We believe that if we achieve our purpose, then everything else will follow. They don't say what that will be. But here we are working across all territories, and look at the scale of those territories over which data is being sucked into this company and also given out to other people to use. I'm going to be asking some questions about what data they hold on me in the first place. But let's continue the picture, and it's a little bit dark here, but we're into equity with Queen's Park. What are they all about? Well, it says here that we buy to build by focusing on entrepreneur-led businesses with accelerated growth potential. And then if we get further into their website, they give a big support piece for Saga City itself, saying that it's a leading provider of tech-enabled customer data management solutions, predominantly to the utilities, telecoms and financial services sector. So I'm going to be doing more on this, but that just shows you what you can get out of one simple letter, which appeared to be out of concern for my health and in particular my hearing. But I think this was a classic example of not only the move towards identity of every human being, but of course the value of data that these companies are sucking up.
And sticking on the topic of data and bulk data collection, now we've covered the issue of Huawei in the past and whether Huawei is going to be allowed to put any of its equipment on telecoms networks in the UK. That's obviously banned now. But Germany is also getting on the bandwagon. So this was from yesterday from AFP. Germany said Thursday it will phase out the use of components from Chinese telecoms giants Huawei and ZTE in its 5G networks in the coming years. Due to national security concerns. Now, who is behind this claim of national security concerns with respect to Huawei? Well, of course, it is our old friend Christopher Steele, who not only pushed the Trump dossier, and there was not a word of truth in that, and pushed the Russia dossier, and not a word of truth in that either, but also pushed the Huawei dossier. And of course, this was claiming that Huawei was orchestrating a covert campaign to manipulate MPs in the United Kingdom. So we have talked about Unit 8200 in Israel in the past as well with respect to Huawei and so on. I'm going to go back and look at this again today and look at a slightly different aspect of it. So just to remind you, Unit 8200 is the Israeli Signals Intelligence Agency, the equivalent of the NSA in the United States or GCHQ in the UK. And when we covered this in the past, we were particularly interested in their connections to Checkpoint and the fact that they had provided the seed capital and the founders for Checkpoint, and Checkpoint effectively being one of the key network providers of firewalls, of routers and other things on the internet and so on, and in corporate networks as well. But today we're going to have a look at the other organization that we highlighted in the past, which is Palo Alto Networks. Well, Palo Alto Networks was founded, or at least co-founded, by this gentleman, Nir Zook. And this is their description of him. They say that he brings a wealth of network security experience and industry experiences to Palo Alto Networks. Prior to co-founding Palo Alto Networks, he was CTO at NetScreen Technologies, which was acquired by Juniper Networks in 2004. And prior to NetScreen, Nir was co-founder and CTO at OneSecure, a pioneer in intrusion prevention and detection appliances. Nir was also a principal engineer at Checkpoint Software Technologies and was one of the developers of stateful inspection technology. And the key point here is that he was also, at one point prior to all this, an employee or a conscript to Unit 8200, and that provided the seed funding for OneSecure, for Checkpoint, and for Palo Alto Networks. So the question then is, what are these organizations, these companies, and what is their relationship to the intelligence agencies? Just as a by the way, a couple of years ago, he moved back to Israel. So he is back in that country doing whatever he's doing there. Now, let's just bring this on screen. This was an expose by Haaretz. This is going back to September last year. Revealed Israeli cyber firms have developed an insane new spyware tool. No defense exists. And what they're talking about here is a Haaretz investigation, which they say reveals that the Israeli cyber companies developed technology that exploits the advertising system at the heart of the online economy to monitor civilians, hack into their phones and computers, and spy on them. This terrifying capability, against which no defense currently exists, has already been sold to a non-democratic country. And the point here is that the approval for this was given by the Israeli government and the Israeli Defense Ministry itself. The company that's behind this, also supported by Unit 8200, seed funded, is called Instinet Limited. Instinet Limited, they don't even have a website. They're that covert, as it were, but they are selling spyware and so on. So the question is, what involvement do these companies that are seed funded by Unit 8200 and the Israeli intelligence agencies, what purpose do they serve actually, and what role do they play in the whole cyber warfare situation. Now, just to give you a little bit of background, Israel has the Israeli National Cyber Directorate, and Unit 8200 there is considered to be the offensive branch of the Israel National Cyber Directorate. So this is totally offensive. And on the other side here, we have this organization, which is considered defensive. And I do apologize. The name has completely escaped me at the moment. But anyway, we'll put that in the show notes to make sure that everybody knows who the defensive side of the Israel National Cyber Directorate is. But just to highlight this a bit further, a few years ago, The Intercept published this article, Cash, Weapons and Surveillance. The US is a key party to every Israeli attack. And this was talking about the offensive cyber warfare capabilities of the Israeli government and the involvement of the NSA and GCHQ in contributing to that as a result of information leaked by Edward Snowden. So the key point here is what relationship, again, do the intelligence agencies in the UK, the US and Israel and their cyber offensive efforts have to the private companies. But let's bring this on. Over the last decade, said The Intercept, the NSA has significantly increased the surveillance assistance it provides to its Israeli counterpart, the Israeli SIGINT National Unit, also known as Unit 8200, including data used to monitor and target Palestinians. In many cases, the NSA and ISNU work cooperatively with the British and Canadian spy agencies, GCHQ and CSEC. The relationship has, on at least one occasion, entailed the covert payment of large amount of cash to Israeli operatives. So why am I interested in Palo Alto Networks today? Well, I was watching the Tour de France last night, and in the ad break, an advert came on screen. Let's just have a look at it.
It was just a regular Cybersecurity Monday. That's me. I'd seen this before. Or had I? What was this AI treachery? I needed some help. Good thing I knew someone. Or something.
Glad you called, Jay. It's time for an upgrade.
Awesome. My path became clear. I knew what I had to do. Because they never stop. No time to waste. This isn't sci-fi. This is precision AI.
So Palo Alto Networks now bringing what they're describing as precision AI into the whole cybersecurity field. So I've got a number of questions that I think need to be raised. Let's bring them on screen. First of all, what is the true nature of the symbiotic relationship, apparently symbiotic relationship between cyber warfare and cyber defense? Because we have an organization, Unit 8200, pursuing cyber warfare with GCHQ, NSA, and so on, while at the same time they're seed funding cyber defense organizations. This seems to be symbiotic and a very dangerous situation there. Are cyber defense companies seed funded by Israeli intelligence bulk data collectors for 8200, NSA and GCHQ? And if they are, what's the effect of bringing AI into the equation going to be? Let's continue. Once cyber defense companies like Palo Alto Networks include AI in their offerings, does that multiply or diminish the threat? And then the final question is Huawei the enemy? Or in fact, do we face an enemy in our own countries and perhaps centered around Israel? I think there are many questions to be asked around this whole sort of structure and this whole capability that's been developed. And nobody in the tech industry is asking what the role of these companies actually is.
Well, I think your concerns are well founded, Mike, and lots to be asked because this thing is moving at an incredible pace and in most cases out of sight or hidden in plain sight as far as the wider public's concerned. So we will continue to focus on it.
Ben, let's come back to you then and more on Tony Blair.
Yes, absolutely. That was a great little piece there on Unit 8200, Mike. Thanks for that. There were two terms that jumped out at me. One was AI treachery, because I think that sums up really nicely a lot of what we're seeing here. And then also this word precision, which keeps on reoccurring. And actually, it came up quite a few times in the Tony Blair event. I'm just going to talk through a little bit about what's driving this. So we talked about the Blair's desire to, or his recommendation that we should be embedding advanced technology into the heart of the state. And he does that because he's appealing to the success of this technology in the private sector ultimately. And we're pointed towards three examples by him. JP Morgan Chase. So they employ over 2,000 AI experts. Amazon have reduced their order processing times by 25%, so made their operations more efficient. And Goldman Sachs tells us that $1 trillion is going to be invested over the next few years. Ergo, because those three organizations are doing things, that means that everyone else, including the British government, has to jump on board. I'm not sure I follow the logic, to be honest with you. Now, he also talks about the transformation of the market. So just looking at the top 15 global companies in 1997 when he was first voted into power versus the top 15 global companies in 2024. Obviously, the top companies, really the top 5 to 10 companies are all technology businesses. And he is presenting this as some kind of reason for us to embrace these technologies. There's absolutely no discussion whatsoever about whether any of that has been good for society, the health impacts of mobile phones on kids. Any of that stuff is completely ignored. It's just purely about top line numbers, size, and growth. And it's all being waved through with recommendations from people like Bill Gates, Andrew McAfee at MIT, and Ray Kurzweil at Google. So these are the big beasts, the big names that Blair's reaching out for to build his case for change. And he's actually directing the Labour government. This is in his own words. He's advising Labour to talk to Google. Now, this is a huge public-private marketplace, and the delivery is going to be handled by big technology companies. And Debbie Weinstein, who is the MD of Google in the UK and Ireland, was actually in the crowd. I heard someone did a little write-up saying that she was there. So, if you're in government and you want to talk to Google and you're at the Tony Blair event, then, hey, look, Debbie's just over there in the corner. You can go and talk to her. This is absolutely stitched up. It's all global. Yes, obviously, this is the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. And as we've discovered and discussed, it's all about building an international marketplace. So this was from one of the climate sessions. And by the way, I suggest anyone with any interest in what's going on internationally, and specifically here in the UK, go and watch all of these sessions, right? They are talking about you. They're talking about your tax money. They're talking about our society. They're talking about their plans for the future. If you want to understand what's driving Labour, what that word change actually means that apparently everyone's voted for, this is where you need to go and look, right? And a lot of it is to do with the City of London, ultimately, right? This is about driving economic growth. It's about making money for big international investment funds. You can see on the left-hand side there, it's about driving global investment, so leveraging the City of London's expertise to develop non-standard finance mechanisms. And then also to create, they say there in the second point, to design a national wealth fund to support international as well as national investment. And that national wealth fund was actually announced by Rachel Reeves on the same day as the Future Great Britain event. Unbelievable coincidence that, don't you think? And Mark Carney's been incredibly effusive about that fund as well, and the fact that it's going to allow public and private money to come together to drive change, not just in the UK, but across the system, and to unleash global innovation. Yeah, and it's not just in climate, that is absolutely everywhere else. And I think we need to understand the UK, start to understand the UK as a platform for testing out these new programs for transformational change that are then also going to be implemented internationally. It's really, really important to get into the guts of what's going on here. And it is completely global. This was a remarkable statement from Ilan Gur, who is the chief executive of ARIA, which is the UK version of DARPA. He's got £800 million of taxpayer money to invest in advanced technology projects. And his view is that the UK, it needs to look outward. Don't look inward. Don't look to your own people. Don't look to your own capabilities. Don't look to your own heritage and your own history. You've got to look elsewhere for ideas, right? What a remarkable thing for someone like that to say. And it was also echoed by William Hague, who has basically been working hand in glove with Blair for the past year or two, really providing the kind of right-wing counterpoint to Blair's left-wing message, right, to provide the kind of integrated uniparty perspective. And he's basically saying that in the future, we need global solutions, not national solutions. Absolutely emphatic. And that comes through in everything that we've heard from him. Really interesting session by a guy called Chris Miller, who I believe is from Stanford. And this is the only one that hasn't been put online. And it may appear in the next few days. But if it doesn't come up, then I'm about to tell you why. Because he very interestingly described artificial intelligence, microprocessors and microchips in particular as the kind of the playing pieces in a big geopolitical game where the American intelligence agencies view access to those technologies as a way to exercise political control over vassal states, right? So actually, if you play nicely with American intelligence, then they will let you have access to the limited number of AI chips that exist out there in the market. Really amazing, bold statement to come out with, incredibly cynical, but very unsurprising given the forum and who was in the room. And the other thing that was really interesting here was he, whether he meant to or not, revealed the fragility of this entire technological paradigm, because this is a global supply chain, globally networked, with a tiny handful of countries who actually pull the strings. So 90% of these microprocessors that run the AI systems come from Taiwan, for example, which, as we know, is a contested region. The Chinese believe that they own it. The Taiwanese believe that they don't own it, and could potentially be invaded at some point in the future. And apparently we've got to base our entire system, governance, economy on the back of technologies that are running on this supply chain. I think that exposes us to an extraordinary level of risk, completely unacceptable, really. We also had there Matt Clifford, the chairman of ARIA, who was effusive, effervescent about the potential for AI to transform absolutely everything. He was really excited about the work that he's been doing with UK government, and actually talked about people leaving organizations like DeepMind or Google or OpenAI to go into roles in the UK government. UK government is now seen as a hot place to go and do tech work. I think we should all be really concerned about that, to be perfectly honest with you. He talked a lot about the actual physical transformation that's going to be required in the nation, the fact that we've got to build these data centers everywhere, right? Because the AI systems run on huge amounts of data. Where are those data centers going to exist? They're going to be in your neighborhood. They're going to be putting these all around the country. A lot of that links into the net zero grid that they're building. He also talked a lot about the massive increases that we've seen in the past decade in the power of these systems. So we can see that between 2014 and 2024, the power of the systems has gone up by 100 million times. So an enormous increase in artificial intelligence power over the past 10 years. But he then goes on to say, in the next decade, we will reach human-like general intelligence. So it really just begs the question to me is, well, if we're investing all of this money, all of this time, all of this energy in building human-like general intelligence, what's wrong with the human-like general intelligence we are currently surrounded by, i.e. us? We're already here. Why do we need to build this new technological paradigm in order to replace something that already exists? And actually, if human-level intelligence doesn't currently exist, and it's much lower. So this was Demis Hassibis saying human-level general intelligence is the goal, but we're not even at cat-level intelligence yet. We've got a long way to go. Why on earth would we be embedding this into the heart of our state and our economy? And particularly when you see things like will.i.am sitting on stage trying to do a demo of an AI chatbot, and the whole thing goes into a complete meltdown. Something's wrong with this thing. John Chappelle losing his mind, the interviewer on stage. And actually the whole thing just, it looks like it's destined to failure.
Well, we can hope.
Yeah, we can hope. But I'd say to our audience, UK column, I think, and Ben in particular, doing some really good analysis on what's happening here. If you're looking at Tony Blair on stage, of course, remember that he is the puppet master for Starmer. So why are we bringing Blair back into the spotlight? It is because almost certainly this is the man who's driving our new Prime Minister and moving his arms. Whether he can actually influence his brain, I don't know. But let's move on to other clues we get as to where society is going to go. And I want to say thank you to Kate, one of the UK column viewers and a very long-term supporter, who pointed out the Ministry of Defence's Global Strategic Trends. The Future starts today, the 6th edition. This is from 2018, I believe. I've just pulled out a couple of interesting things, but let's set the scene first of all. It says that it describes a strategic context for defence and security looking out to the middle of the century. It takes a comprehensive view of the future, derived through research headed by the Development, Concepts and Doctrine Centre. Now, the MOD goes to lengths to say that this only represents the view of DCDC. It doesn't represent MOD opinion, but of course it's got the MOD logo there, top left. So I think this is a bit fancy waistcoats. It does have signatures by people, General Sir Nick Carter and the Permanent Secretary Stephen Lovegrove. So surprising, isn't it, an age of digital supremacy, that they actually need to get a wet pen out and put a smudge on the paper.
I suspect neither of those people could do anything else. But anyway.
Right, okay. Well, anyway, let's have a look at what caught my attention as I scanned 200 pages. It said erosion of state sovereignty. The nation state is expected to remain the primary actor in shaping societies and global politics for at least the next 30 years. That, to me, said after that, there's going to be something different.
Yeah.
And so now what we're into, this is the military working hand in glove with civil authorities about the future and how we're going to live. And somebody in the chat box, as the news was rolling a few minutes ago, and Ben was talking, said, well, how does all this benefit the UK? Well, the answer is all of the AI is not to benefit UK. It is to move us through into the next stage of society, which is beyond the nation state. I'll leave you to think about that. I also pulled out this one here. We just highlight the paragraph. It says that a whole of society approach to defensive and offensive measures in the information space is necessary to ensure protection against physical and cognitive attack and subversion of society, for example, through legislation and education. So what they're telling us here is that we are just not capable of looking out the window or scanning through a newspaper and understanding what's real or not. The government is going to have to protect us, and they are going to have to monitor these systems in both an offensive and a defensive way. And that, to my mind, links into your commentary earlier on, Mike. So people really should have a look at this. I'll do some more delving into this document, but very, very dangerous. We've got a blurring now of what is military and what is civilian. And I think this bodes extremely badly for a future, particularly if it's run by AI working at the level of a cat. But let's end on a little bit of black humour, and what better place to go than the BBC? Let's just have a look at their fact-checking team in action.
This was the scene in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv yesterday. Parts of a children's hospital totally destroyed. It happened during a Russian airstrike, but Russia say this damage was caused by a Ukrainian air defense missile. Ukraine says it's found remnants of a Russian cruise missile. So who's right? Two videos we verified are crucial to investigating Russian claims. In the first, you can see a huge plume of smoke in the distance before a moment of impact. The second video is crucial, and we've slowed it down so you can see this missile moments before impact. So just watch it here. And you can see that coming down. We'll actually stop and zoom in for you. You can see it right there. Now, it's worth bearing in mind, this is a still and it's very blurry freeze frame. But we showed this video to 7 weapons experts who regularly review grainy footage just like this. And all of them said that this is not a surface-to-air defense missile as the Russians have claimed. For example, one of them, Timothy Wright from International Institute for Strategic Studies, said The missile speed, angle of attack, profile, and especially its sound, the sound of a high-pitched turbofan, is very prominent and a dead giveaway, and are consistent with an air-breathing land attack cruise missile. Now, this is a Russian cruise missile, and one of its identifying features is the turbo engine at the rear. And that's what some of our experts have focused on, particularly this one, Andrei Genon, who's one of them, and he said it's almost certainly a KH-101. The distinguishing feature of that missile is the turbofan engine at the rear that juts out, appearing like a small box. Now, we've overlaid a model of the KH-101 on top of the freeze frame of the video we showed you earlier. Now, nobody's been absolutely definitive about the exact missile used, but they all agreed that it was likely an air-launched Russian missile. 5 of the 7 mentioned a Russian KH-101 as a possibility, in line with what Ukraine has said.
Well, I'm just going to say that I think this was really a brilliant piece of production by the BBC, because, of course, they didn't show you the evidence of those so-called experts. We don't even know who they are. They simply choose one that said it was almost certain. But if you listen to the whole clip, what this girl is constantly saying is these are very, very blurry photographs and they're very difficult. But if we just show the meat of what the BBC did on screen, so she brought up on her very big shiny touchscreen this picture of the missile coming down in shadowy top sort of right in the picture, and then the BBC's Russian KH-101 cruise missiles. As the video moved on, we started to see one overlaid until you get to this point where in the minds of the viewer, overwhelmingly, they will believe that it was that missile. So this is sleight of hand. I'm going to say this is BBC witchcraft rather than fact-checking, but this is how the BBC is attempting to put facts across. So despicable work by the BBC, and of course no facts at all, just supposition and interfering with the public's perception. Huge amount of questions still to be asked around this particular incident.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've got to leave it there for today. Thanks to Brian and Ben. We will be back in a few minutes if you're a UK column member for Extra. Stick around on the member stream for that.
And just before we go, I'm going to put up an old UK column newspaper. Many of you simply don't know that we used to produce these editions. This is 2013. And in the cartoon, we're talking about the cabal destroying Britain with big society, the media gagged, secret courts, the NHS wrecked, the military betrayed, paedophiles protected, the police threatened, genocide overseas, and banking fraud. And I'm going to say we weren't far wrong, Mike.
No, and if you want to know more about that, and you haven't seen the UK Column Live virtual event that we did a few weeks ago, you better go and have a look at that. That would be great. And but otherwise, join us on Extra, where I'm sure we're going to be talking about this some more.
We will. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.